Real Madrid's biggest game of the season so far is on Tuesday. This is a must-win game. It's a must-win game. Atalanta is first in the Serie A. They're a high-pressing team. Of course, we faced them in the Super Cup a few months ago, and with Real Madrid winning 2-0, both goals came in the second half. But we cannot deny the fact that teams that press aggressively cause Real Madrid difficulty. First, let's look at where Real Madrid is in the standings in the Champions League. We're in 24th, which is only one spot above the elimination zone. Nobody, including myself, expected Real Madrid to have this many defeats in the Champions League so far. Last season, we only lost one game. And if somehow Real Madrid doesn't come away with a result when they go to Italy on Tuesday, then they potentially could be eliminated from the Champions League, which obviously would be a huge disaster and an embarrassment. Now, when you look at the teams that are below Real Madrid in the Champions League, you've got PSG, Shakhtar, Stuttgart, and Sparta Praha. PSG has Salzburg away, which is not an easy game. Stuttgart has Young Boys at home, which you should expect them to win. But there's no guarantees. But here's the thing. As bad as Real Madrid has been so far in the Champions League so far this season, they still have an opportunity to finish in the top 8 if they win their remaining 3 games, which is actually shocking. The team that's in 8th right now, which is Monaco, they have 10 points. And when you look at the teams that are in the top 8, they can feasibly drop points between now and then the end of the Champions League group stage. But mathematically, if any of these top 8 teams win their 2 out of their next 3 games, then mathematically Real Madrid cannot make it to the top 8, because Real Madrid, if they win their remaining 3, they can finish with 15 points. So it's not in Real Madrid's hand mathematically, but I expect the teams in the top 8 to drop points between now and their remaining games, or at least 1 or 2 teams in the top 8 to do so. The most difficult game left for Real Madrid in the Champions League group stages is the game on Tuesday. It is so critical. It's so important that Real Madrid walk away from this game with 3 points, which is why Real Madrid made sure that Vinicius was going to be back for the game on Tuesday, and he's in the squad list. Rodrygo didn't travel with the team to Girona, and Carlo Ancelotti said he was doing some personal training at Valdebebas to recover and be ready. If there was ever a time this season where I felt better about our chances facing Atalanta, it would be right now. After a big win against Girona away from home, Kylian Mbappé scored a very challenging goal. Jude Bellingham is starting to score assists again. He had a world-class performance. So those are some of the most important players being back to the team, and hopefully all 4 will start. I'm talking Rodrygo, Mbappé, Vinicius, and Jude Bellingham. But Ferland Mendy did pick up an injury, which means Fran Garcia is going to start at left back. But the big question is what will happen with Raul Asensio, because he was benched in the game against Girona and Tchouaméni came in at center back. When he was asked about it after the game, Carlo Ancelotti said that he benched Raul Asensio because he had some fatigue. But he didn't say anything about Raul Asensio not starting for tactical reasons. So the big question is, what is Carlo Ancelotti going to do with Raul Asensio? Is he going to bring him back into the starting lineup and move Tchouaméni back to the midfield? In many ways, that makes sense in this game, because what that does allow is players like Valverde to be able to have more of a presence in midfield. And given that Lookman is Atalanta's biggest threat, he is the most dangerous player for Atalanta. Having Lucas Vázquez versus Lookman is not going to be an easy matchup. And that's where you need a guy like Fede Valverde helping Lucas Vázquez. And that's why I expect Tchouaméni to come back into the midfield, and we'll see more defensive work, more of a defensive shift being put in by Fede Valverde. But if there's one thing we learned in the game against Girona, it's that you need a guy like Jude Bellingham on the ball as much as possible, between the lines. Because when he's fed the ball between the lines in the types of zones, he can make things happen. So we don't need a guy like Jude Bellingham to play in a very deep position where he's not able to affect the play, and he's scoring, assisting right now. Thank God he's no longer playing that role where he was playing as a right defensive midfielder. He was playing that role immediately after Dani Carvajal suffered his ACL injury. I think Carlo is starting to understand that a guy like Jude, the higher up the pitch, the better. But nobody does as much work defensively as Jude Bellingham. So he's a victim of his own success. If there's one thing we learned from the last game against Atalanta, is that they play a very high press, but they also have a very high line. And you can exploit that by having runners from the half space, players like Fede, players like Jude Bellingham. But what you cannot do is sit in a deep block and invite pressure, because these guys know what they're doing with their press. So I do expect Real Madrid to be a little bit more vertical in this game and a little bit more aggressive without the ball, because that's what this game calls for. But the big question is Carlo Ancelotti going to go back to the 4-3-3 formation? And if he does and brings back Rodrygo, Vinicius, and Mbappé up front, there's 2 questions. The question is he rushing both Rodrygo and Vinicius back too quickly? Or will Vinicius or Mbappé play centrally? In the last game against Girona, Mbappé played down the middle. We still don't know what Carlo is going to do in this game. Whether he's going to employ 4 in the middle, or if he's going to go to a 4-3-3. I think part of what that really depends on and hinges on is whether Rodrygo is really back to full fitness. Because it looks like Vinicius is healthy and ready to play. Is he going to go back to the old formation that he played last season with Mbappé and Vinicius up top, with a sort of 4-4-2 formation out of possession? But that formation, what that does is it takes a lot away from Jude Bellingham, because he's on the left flank and he's not in a position to really affect the ball when we're in transition. The thing is with this game is, I know that when it comes to big matches where it's high stakes, Real Madrid finds a way to win. And part of the issue with the Champions League new format is it feels like every game is a low stakes game. Even if Real Madrid somehow doesn't win the game against Atalanta, theoretically, they could still make it to the playoffs and eventually to the knockout stages. Obviously, you don't want to ever not win a game. And Carlo Ancelotti is trying to make sure that his best 11 is available on Tuesday. But ultimately, he knows even if Real Madrid suffers another defeat, God forbid, it's not at the end of the season. And that's what worries me, is will these players be 100% focused on the job at hand? Because it's still within their grasp to make it to the top 8. And that's important because it's just a few more games that Real Madrid doesn't have to play, and it guarantees them a position in the knockout stages. And the other question is, with the performance of Luka Modrić against Girona, he had not only that amazing assist to Kylian Mbappé, but he had the pre-assist to Jude Bellingham, who played that beautiful ball down the middle, to Arda Güller. So the question is, Luka Modrić played a lot of minutes against Girona, but he did look good. And we've seen this season, whether it was Dani Ceballos or Modrić, whenever you have a ball-playing midfielder playing for Real Madrid in the system, the team has benefited tremendously. So do you play a 39-year-old Luka Modrić against a high-pressing team, or do you go with Dani Ceballos, a guy who hasn't looked bad in fixtures where Real Madrid has more control and has more of the ball? But do you play him away from home in a very difficult game against a team that's number 1 in the Serie A? I don't think this is the game for Dani Ceballos. But do you play a guy like Arda Güller, who just scored against Girona? We have yet to see Arda play in a deeper position, in a role where he's the one leading the ball progression. So getting the balance right is going to be so important in this game. Anytime I've seen Carlo Ancelotti play Luka Modrić for 90 minutes, that means it's likely he will not start the next game. So if Luka Modrić doesn't start this next game, who do you have that's going to be able to come into the midfield and dictate the play? There's no way in hell you can let Dani Ceballos start. That's an important decision that Carlo Ancelotti has on his hands, because you need to make sure you get that right. This team needs a leader who takes on the responsibility of initiating the build-up play in those deeper positions, especially against a team that's going to press you so high. This is going to be a really important game on Tuesday. Real Madrid cannot afford a situation where they're losing again. It's time to make a statement, and it's time to gain some consistency and gain rhythm. As long as these players can stay healthy and Carlo Ancelotti can rotate the team, there's so much more to play for this season. But if Real Madrid makes it to every single final of every tournament that they're playing in, they'll play 72 games this season. And the rotations have been alarming so far, if we're being 100% honest. The game against Girona, it was only in the 85th or 86th minute where Carlo Ancelotti finally took off Fede Valverde and took off Jude Bellingham. You're up 3-0 and you're waiting into the deep end of the game for you to make substitutions. That is what's worrisome for me here, is that the number of fixtures Real Madrid has ahead is quite a bit. This is not a sprint, it's a marathon. But I know the team will be focused. And the other thing that concerns me is the fact that Real Madrid is now playing another away game. This game is not at the Bernabeu. The team played at San Mamés, they played against Athletic Club, then they traveled to Girona. Now they're traveling to Italy. That's a lot of travel. That's a crunch of games, one after the other. I'm sure not only physically are these players tired, but mentally. So it's really important for them to get the job done on Tuesday. How are you guys feeling? Are you optimistic about getting the 3 points? My prediction is, I think Real Madrid is going to win 3-2. Let me know if you guys agree. Thank you for watching. Hala Madrid.